Hey everyone, we're really glad you're here for our cyber threat workshop. Today is July 15th, 2021. We're excited to share with you a lot of findings and go through some lab exercises to utilize threat intelligence in very practical, everyday use cases. And so we do have a lot of people on the call today, and several hundred folks that have registered. So what we're going to do is we're going to do that typical thing where we wait for like a minute or so as people start to pile in. In particular, we're going to be looking at something that happened recently. We pivoted on this one because we put out these workshops and we generally go through research and use cases and get into the data sets and all of that. But in particular, over the last couple of weeks with the Kaseya vulnerability that was discovered and some of the detections that we've done to uncover where it's hiding and where its distribution might be problematic, especially in like the Cobalt Strike sense. Benjamin, I know we'll go into some of that.
Right.
What we did was say, hey, this is a great topic. So let's throw it in for the one on the 15th. So here we are. And as per usual, in all of our cyber threat workshops, you have Benjamin Powell here and myself, Josh Mayfield from RiskIQ. Really excited to have you. The format is kind of Bert and Ernie. We sort of like talk back and forth about what it is we're finding, what it is we're discovering. And in the process, we're going to give you access to the threat intelligence itself, guide you through what to be looking for, what to find, what implicates another thing, how to look through that chain of events and that chain of relationships across the internet to discover where the bad guys are. And more importantly, where the threat tools are. Because, when it comes to, when you're facing a loaded gun, do you really care who's holding the trigger? And there's a lot of loaded guns out there and a lot of distribution of malware and further than that, a lot of threat infrastructure that can be stood up and burned down just as quickly. And when those guns and bazookas and cannon fire just pops up anywhere and everywhere, it's important to be able to mitigate against those threats, regardless of whoever's operating it. And so again, we're going to let a few more moments go by here to allow some of the folks to come in to the workshop setting. Benjamin, any other comments there you wanted to make?
Yeah. So the thing that was kind of interesting with this one was one threat actor started this, but then others jumped on the coattails because they saw that this was successful and they started attacking and they started exploiting. So it's just like you said, it's not where it's just one thing, but it was many different threat actors. So now you have to protect yourself from all these people around the world. So hopefully by the time we get done, we can see how you can look to see the impact on something that's global to yourself, to your supply chain, and then, how much money these threat actors are actually bringing in from these attacks. And so you'll understand why they're doing this. And then we'll look at some of the fake stuff that's out there, and then how that ties into threat actor infrastructure. And we'll look at from the GUI, from the API, from integrations to give you a full view of what's out there.
Yeah, that's a good point. And you bring up a couple of good topics there. And for those of you out there, here's the first poll question that's not really a poll question. Any fans of Jupyter Notebook? Anybody? We're going to be having a lot of fun with Jupyter today. I know in past workshops, that's always a topic. We love it too, do a lot of work with Jupyter. And so today we're going to showcase some of the really cool things that you can do to try to set up alerts, set up customized queries and easy ways to spot all of these problematic areas wherever they come into. And the other one you mentioned, Benjamin, which is just commonplace now, is once we've digitized our whole business, including our product supply chain, our customer supply chain, and everything that makes all the digital dependencies work, it creates just an entire environment that can become kind of difficult when you don't even know all those digital dependencies, all those various third parties. We all have attack surfaces, but typically I can only see my own. But being able to see another third party's attack surface, how it relates, how it entangles itself with mine, as well as threats, to then see and discover where it is that through a third party, an attack can hit me. And so we're going to go through some of those things today, folks. And again, at this point, I think who's here is going to be here. And those that are late, well, they're just going to miss out. But if you want to go to the next slide real quick, just do some quick introductions. Benjamin, take us off.
Okay, so I'm Benjamin Powell. I'm the Director of Technical Marketing here at RiskIQ. I've worked in IT for over 30 years, running teams and then working on um, companies that build security products. So one fun fact is I love to spearfish. And so when I say that to people in our industry, they don't want to take my emails, but I actually swim in the ocean and catch fish. And this is one of my my photos of one of the biggest fish I've caught so far this last year. On the background, you can see some of my spear guns. They're not hose attachments like Brandon asked about power washers. They're actually spear guns I use when I go swimming in the ocean.
I hadn't thought of that. You're right. It has the kind of look of the car wash, where you pull in and you.
Yes, Brandon teases me all the time about that.
Yeah, that's good. And yeah, you're right. You don't want to necessarily tell people that you do spearfishing, without some context. But yes, and I'm in Austin, Texas. Josh Mayfield with RiskIQ, which is nowhere near any ocean. And my background's a little bit different. So I come at this a little bit more from the academic side, where in my studies, did a lot of threat actor profiling and attacker psychology. And so getting into the heads of what are motivating people, in particular, the economics of threat behavior and how cryptocurrencies in particular, that's what I did my graduate research on, is how that fuels the criminal underground when it comes to cyber warfare and cyber criminality. And so again, Benjamin, very much the practitioner, me, the kind of profiler over here of motivations of cyber criminals. But together, we have a lot of fun hunting these folks down and finding where they're hiding, ultimately to keep our customers safer and to create an overall safer internet. And in addition today, my apologies, we didn't have his picture up there a moment ago, but joining us is also Brandon Dixon, who is our Vice President of Strategy and the co-founder of Passive Total. But Brandon, you want to make a quick introduction?
Yeah, sure. I think you guys covered it. Wrote Passive Total many years ago, sold that business over to RiskIQ, continue to support the business in a number of ways, and along with my original co-founder, Steve Ginty. So I'd like to just attend these workshops every now and then to answer questions, provide any input, and just try to be as helpful as I can. So thanks for the introduction there.
Glad to have you. So moving on from that ugly guy on the screen there, we can go to the next slide, Benjamin.
Yeah, we also have Ryan. Do you want to?
Oh yes, I'm sorry. And assisting us today is Ryan Salerno. I'm so sorry, Ryan. Assisting us today is Ryan Salerno. So think about this as kind of like when you're back in school, where you have the teacher and then like the teacher's assistant, or the professor and the professor assistant. I don't even know what they call them anymore. But he's going to be walking around the virtual classroom, making sure everybody can get online, answer questions in a rapid way. There's no Scantrons we're going to pass out, so you lucked out there. But he's going to be assisting with some of the ins and outs, making sure you get into the trial, making sure that you have all the full access. If you're not seeing something correctly, he'll be rapid response while we go through the material. And in particular, the thing we're going to be using today is RiskIQ Illuminate. And so if you want to hit the next button, it'll kind of draw an orange square around that. There you go. So RiskIQ Illuminate, again, you're going to get full access to everything today. But it has a lot of data sets and a lot of different partitions of how that's repurposed in the GUI, as well as like we're going to do with the API and pumping things into Jupyter, but looking at all of those relevant pieces of information about your own attack surface, attackers and their attack surface, their infrastructure, as well as critical third parties and some streamlined things that happen with SecOps intelligence as well. So we'll go ahead and go on to the next one. And luckily for everybody here, there's a moment here that again, I'm very glad that Brandon Dixon is here. He's done probably more work with our friends at Microsoft than anybody else at RiskIQ. I've been working with him for several years. But earlier this week, there were some headlines, Brandon.
Yeah, exciting headlines for sure. For anyone who didn't see the news, Microsoft has put out their intent to acquire RiskIQ as a business. And, we're now in the process of having that deal close. But, just want to make a note, like from the perspective of how RiskIQ changes, it's business as usual from our end. There will be no change to how RiskIQ operates and the services that we offer. We'll continue to support the community, be involved, host workshops like this, and continue to spread the knowledge. So it's really exciting for us. We're really thrilled with the outcome here. It allows us to take our attack surface and threat intelligence to a much broader scale, and really protect and execute on that safer internet mission.
Very helpful.
Yeah. We're all excited. This is really cool to see that we can make the community even better, having more access to information. And I just can't wait to see the future, to see how we can really make an impact on the internet and make it safer for everyone.
Yeah, and that's the good part of it, is that shared values that we have, as well as what's going on with Microsoft, that we're both steering toward a common goal, and that's a safer internet. We publish a report every year called the Evil Internet Minute, and what we want to see is those figures go down. We want to see less evil on the internet and more cooperation and collaboration. The internet gives our whole human species a great opportunity to make advancements and to work with one another in empathetic and humanitarian ways, and those can be curtailed by others that have other motives out there. And together with Microsoft and this community, many of which are here today, we can do it. We can actually make that internet a safer place for everyone. And so we do have some poll questions, but these are not like polls like trying to understand who you are and how you tick, nearly as much as trying to know where we should guide certain use cases.
Yeah.
So first question out of the gate, Barrett, I believe you're going to be running the poll questions. Is that accurate? Because I don't see them on my end. Are you able to launch the poll questions? We wanted to see what your years. Thank you. Yeah.
The reason why we ask these is because when we talk about these use cases, we want to put it in the perspective that you're familiar with. Yeah. And so we'll frame the information to the audience, just like you do in your job. So we're going to make sure that we address your needs, and we tell you the way that you need to understand it to show you how you have some benefit or understanding to these attacks and vectors of attacks.
That's right. And so out of the gate, first questions should pop up on everybody's Zoom interface here. And that's just what's your experience with threat intelligence. And so if we launch that real quick, Barrett, that poll will stay open there for a moment. And the options are pretty simple, less than 2 years, 2 to 5, more than 5, and some, which is usually about 10 to 15% on these. I've never used threat intelligence, and which is really good when you think about it that you're here, because ours is really simple to use because it starts with you and your attack surface. And so you can really orient yourself around where am I, and then where are the threats that are against me. And so that's our first one out of the chute here. We'll give it a couple more seconds, and you can just go and let us know how familiar you are, your degree of experience, and then we'll just level set there where everybody looks. So Barrett, you want to show the results?
Okay, so we have 42% less than 2 years, 26% 2 to 5 years, 16% more than 5 years, and 70% never. So
yeah. So more than half of you are 2 years or less, including the nevers, right? So excited you're here. We're going to make this real simple and very easy to walk through. The slide that went next, and then we went back to the one that says poll questions, guides you through how to get into the system today. So if we want to advance that real quick, we can then talk through the credentials and how to get access.
So what we did was a little bit different than what we've done in the past. What we used to do is just give you a promo code that you can use to have access to the data sets. But because we are doing things that are with attack surfaces, it's sometimes difficult to give access to multiple attack surfaces. So what we did was we created a lab environment where if you log in with CTW at threattracking.com as the username at community.riskiq.com. And what we're going to do is we're going to paste these into the chat to make it easy for everybody. So give me a second. Okay, and I'm just going to quickly go back. I'm going to just copy and paste real quick to make our lives easier. Account and password. All of my windows disappeared. Give me a quick second. Okay, so everyone will have the credentials to get in. Okay. Oops. Here we go. And then after the workshop, what we're going to do is we're going to disable this. So if you after the workshop, we'll show you how to kick off your own trial so you can have access to see your own attack surface. Now, when we create the attack surface, it's based upon your domain name. So if you use a Yahoo or a Gmail domain, you're not going to get an attack surface. But if you use your corporate email, we'll generate an attack surface for you so you can see all of your assets that are externally facing. So then you can see the same things that we're doing today. Okay. And then if you like to see the different types of attack surfaces that we have, you can contact us and we can do like third-party attack surfaces. It could be, your supply chain, it could be competitors, it could be anybody. And then we can show you those things the same way that we show you your attack surface. And we'll go through how we gather this data, and there's nothing to install. It's just there and it updates every day.
That's right. And with that in mind, sometimes when we're looking at our attack surface and we're looking at third parties in particular, it oftentimes is in the context of a vulnerability. And so Barrett, I know we have another poll question here to ask now, kind of shifting gears a little bit and chatting through in your organization, are you or others, which teams are generally responsible for looking at vulnerabilities in your own attack surface and trying to understand where those vulnerabilities reside. So I'm butchering the question, Barrett, but it's generally just who's responsible for attack surface vulnerabilities. Is it this team or that team? And so we'll launch that poll question again, just to contextualize to see who we're talking to, who's in the virtual room here to understand, okay, and guide the use cases from that perspective, given what your responsibilities are. So we'll launch that now. So tracking vulnerabilities in your organization.
And sometimes it's not your responsibility, but you do such a good job at work that management comes to you and goes, hey, is this issue, do we have to be concerned? What about from within our own environment or within the supply chain?
So we'll just give that a second real quick, because some of this is a lot of orientation. As I was saying, the way we do security intelligence, the way we do threat intelligence is a bit different, where we start with you and then look at threats that pertain to you and where your attack surface is entangled with another. And so rather than just pumping a lot of research at you, instead it's looking at yourself in the context of the whole internet, including the things that are bad. So we have a few answers here. The majority of it looks like you're trying to look at those related threat actors, but sometimes you can't see necessarily all the dimensions, the layers, and the permutations of your attack surface. We understand that. Something we deal with all the time with our customers and the wider community. But then interestingly, about a quarter of you, that 26%, I guess, say that the vulnerability team is really responsible for that. And I'm just curious how many folks here might be vulnerability individuals, maybe not threat specialists or threat investigators, but could be those that are in the vulnerability team, which we'll get into those particular use cases. But it seems like, Benjamin, we can kind of take a middle approach. There's right, people exactly. are kind of all over there.
Yeah. Okay. So when you think about these threats, they from an intel perspective or incident response perspective, you read about something and you go, okay, this sounds pretty serious. And the next thing is, do we have it? How big is the problem? What about our supply chain? What about the people we do business with? Those are all the questions that come up. And then we're going to show you the ways that you answer those today. Yeah. So one thing that I want to mention is that when we do these workshops, we don't just stay within our tools, because we know that in real life, you might be using data from many different sources to get as many facts as possible to make a good determination. So we're going to be using RiskIQ Illuminate. We're going to be potentially using Google Safe Browsing, URL Scan.io, hybrid analysis, other things to bring in those contexts to give you the full perspective to understand and make a good judgment on, hey, is this suspicious or malicious, and to determine those things. So as we go through these exercises, I will paste in all of the URLs that I'll be using, and you're going to get a copy of this deck. We're recording this as well, so you're going to have access to all this type of information.
Yeah, and with that in mind, as we do all the time when it comes to links that we share, okay, so here's the thing. We map the internet moment by moment, day by day, second by second, whatever sort of time increment you want to put in there. As such, this is live information, okay? This isn't something drawn out from some research that was done in a lab somewhere on a single endpoint where we dissected and sandboxed a piece of malware. These are live things on the internet right now. So we ask you all just to use your best judgment. You're security professionals, you get what that entails. And so just as we're going through and clicking around things, we're going to post a lot of it directly in the chat, so that way you don't necessarily have to navigate there. But at the same time, things like Google Safe Browsing, as an example, is just ensuring that no sort of accidents happen. But just please note, we're going to be using live intelligence directly from the internet. And so just, again, use your best judgments as we're going to interact with threat systems. We're going to interact with adversary infrastructure and adversary tools. And so that's our disclaimer.
It's live data. It's not canned data. It's not made up stuff. These are real things out in the world. And you want to have that air gap between you and that bad thing. You don't want to tip your hand that you're investigating some threat actor that's coming to you. So you want to use a tool that goes out and grabs the data and brings it back and anonymizes your traffic to them. And you could potentially even be blocked to go and look at some of the data out of threat actor. They could filter out your data. So you have to have mechanisms to go there that are maybe going different places of the world, different things, and we'll explain that to you. So we're going to be doing things on Kaseya today. So we're going to look at that vulnerability and how it affects you, the world, your supply chain, and then the threat actors that are leveraging that.
Yeah, and you mentioned supply chain. This one's a particular one, right? When it comes to third parties, because those that are affected are primarily in a context of managed service providers, right?
Right.
And so, gulp when that kind of thing happens. But just to level set folks, to kind of paint a picture here, we all know that we want better intelligence. We want to understand our world better. We want to navigate that internet with more safety and more security. But it's hard. There are challenges, real life challenges, just because of the circumstances that we're all in. And if you go to the next one there, it really comes down to a few things. First, we have nearly infinite attacker targets and a constantly changing attack surface. Digital transformation, for better or worse, it has created a lot of pockets and holes and folds in the digital ether that a lot of threats can hide within, as well as yourself. Yeah. And your own attack surface can hide from you. And being able to then see exactly where I can be exploited. So we need to be able to have line of sight and good visibility. But even then, oftentimes, another challenge when it comes to security intelligence is what matters. How can I prioritize and actually look and investigate at what really counts when it comes to my attack surface and the threats that I actually face? But sometimes there's just overwhelming complexity to it all. The attack surface is non-standard, and I can only partially collect all the information data that's out there. So being able to get some insight into guiding my point of view and scoping in on where the problem is really important. And then once we get that, we're going to have another challenge of getting a meaningful outcome, and getting precision actions that I can actually utilize and take the appropriate steps to investigate more effectively, respond with greater confidence, and ultimately get to that final holy grail, which is scaled defense. Yeah. Being able to really see the applicability of the intelligence, go to my protections, and then become elastic. So as my attack surface changes, as the threat actor's attack surface changes, as my third-party attack surfaces change, as the internet itself changes, I have elastic protection throughout. And so the logic of it is pretty simple, really. And many of us have a good experience somewhat when it comes to the endpoint that we're used to utilizing. And I'm sorry, my camera just went out, but I think I can get it back online here. Oh, there we go. So when it comes to the other endpoint we all have to deal with, the internet, it still operates very similar to the whole of the attack surface on the device side. So this is a ball, and that's our attack surface. Then on the blue side, we have our traditional endpoints, a laptop, a desktop, and something happens there. Well, it pipes up into whatever EDR system, whether it's on-prem or in the cloud, and then there's going to be some analysis. And then once a decision is made and reached about what's a responsible response, it's then applied to all of those same domain-specific things of devices. But then on the digital side, that's the orange side, now we're talking about the internet. So what happens with an external threat out there on the internet? Well, in the same way, what RiskIQ does, what RiskIQ Illuminate does is provide that attack surface intelligence. How is it relevant to me? How does it relate to me by graphing every relationship that lives in the internet, and then being able to apply that same sort of protection outward, but to the other endpoint, to your internet attack surface, to your internet digital footprint. And so that's the digital side of the attack surface. And so when we think about just kind of what we're doing here, the logic is very similar. The only difference is we're changing the scope of our gaze to where what we're looking at is the digital sphere, the outside the firewall, the external attack surface, rather than controlled devices. But the processes and the way to operationalize this kind of intelligence is the same in terms of the general scope. And so that's what we do. So what RiskIQ does is we map every relationship that lives in the internet through every layer from services to silicon all the way through. So that way you can understand all of those relationships, the vulnerabilities that reside within them, and the threats that are actually being used to exploit them. And in particular, the ones that you have, that have your digital presence, that are a part of your digital footprint, that are a part of your attack surface. And so with that, we're able to then deliver on a few different intelligence areas. Your own attack surface. What do I look like on the internet, and where are my areas of exploit? Then being able to guide that into all of the various tech stack systems that we have with streams and feeds and rapid intelligence to enable a security operation that has lots of tools, lots of systems, be able to function effectively because it always is up to speed from the systems to the people to the processes in tech. It all is up to date with the latest intelligence. What we do in the cyber threat intelligence side is we go snooping around in their infrastructure, and we go and we fingerprint it. So that way, when it pops up again, you can have, again, that elastic protection no matter where that threat actor pops up, disappears, and pops up again. The markers of their infrastructure are retained. And so you can, again, scale a lot of defense against that by looking at the loaded gun rather than, of course, we target threat actors too and do all the profiling and all of that, and that's all well and good. The trouble is that they distribute a lot and they share a lot of infrastructure, and there's countless myriad threat actors that don't make the headlines but are today, right now, launching attacks. And so you really need to understand the infrastructure that's orchestrating and carrying that out, because that's ultimately, the end of the loaded gun. That's the barrel of the gun where the shot is fired from. And so mitigating that risk.
Can I mention something else?
Yeah.
So sometimes these threat actors set up shared infrastructure
All the time.
So that's something else that you have to look at. So maybe you're not paying attention to one threat actor, but that shared infrastructure is being used by many. So that's where we found some very cool things that as we go through, we'll be able to show. Yeah. And
when it comes to these global scale attacks, like if you rewind the clock a little bit, it wasn't that long ago. It's 6 months ago that we were all in panic mode when Sunburst happened with SolarWinds, Orion, right? When these global scale attacks start to happen, you do start to see a lot of coordinated effort. Even if it's a relatively small group of threat actors, they're still coordinating. But what you see just hosts of, pun intended, is a lot of their shared infrastructure across several domains in several areas. And then again, your third parties. The same way that the attack surface works for yourself, you can step into a third party's attack surface and truly verify in the moment, real time, right now, what's it look like? What vulnerabilities, what exploits, what threats are being imposed on my third party, which through a chain could hit me. And also it speaks to the criticality of that relationship. Instead of, a questionnaire, checkbox, are you good or not? Those are all valid and good. Those are good things to have. But there's nothing like stepping into another's attack surface, all public information, but organized and distilled for the most relevant things that matter. And then finally, being able to get ahead of vulnerabilities before they're exploited. by understanding the deep dark web chatter. What are the ones of most imminence? What are the ones of most relevance? What is the exploitability, and prioritizing that to get ahead of things that are genuinely in your attack surface instead of just mass scanning and occasionally getting some that are problematic. It flips it around. First, know the vulnerabilities and know the exploits that are happening, then go and guide that scanning and that verification of my own attack surface with much more precision. Instead of looking at 252 various resources, look at the 3 that really matter. And so if we just go on to the next, so those are the different types of intelligence we're going to go through. But Benjamin, I know you're really, really passionate about how the data comes in, how we grind it up and produce it. So take it away.
So when you think about like what we're doing, whenever you make an announcement on a threat actor or a problem, the threat actor adapts and changes over time. So all the stuff that we've done, threat actors do as well. And so I'm going to talk about that real quick. So as we go out there and we're collecting the data, we collect like a real user. So we have what we call a virtual user. It can present cookies, it can do searches, it can come from different places around the world. It can act like every type of device and browser. It acts like the intended victim. And I always say it acts like your parents on the internet. And it tries to gather all that data to be able to understand what's there. So we do over 2 billion web requests a day where we go out there and go to websites. We look at open ports. We even have mobile apps. We go to all the different mobile app stores around the world. We pull down those things as well. We have over 34 million mobile apps that we have in our database. We do over 250,000 domain resolutions a day, over 5 million new host resolutions a day. So as we're going out there, we're grabbing, the JavaScripts, the full document object model, knowing what's coming in and what's going out. Because we're gathering this data, it allows us to understand the context of it. So think about it as the data comes in. We have security and threat researchers that find things. They work with the data scientists to do it at scale. So then we can gather all this data and understand those connections and the issues that we see. But the other unique thing that we have is that, let's say an investigation took a year. After that investigation, they're looked to see, hey, was there some data that linked all this together? And if there is, we go back every single day and we can roll back a new way of finding that, or even rolling out a new data set, because we have that raw data that came in. So that's like how cookies came out years ago. They found a cookie that a threat actor was using, and we're able then to say, well, we should make cookies available to everybody. So those types of things as they come in allow us to understand not only the data sets that you used to love, like Whois or passive DNS, but also looking at the components, what's installed, what's running, the host pairs, what's going in and out of all these websites. And then it allows us to derive data sets to understand, the reputation, if it's phishing, if it's a 0-day, if there's domain infringement, all that type of stuff. So when you think about like the infrastructure chaining that we're capable of doing, if you start with a single piece of malware, that malware might have been from a particular IP, and that IP had a cert. That cert was also associated with a domain, another IP, and we build these chains out. Well, we've done it for the internet, and we can show you your infrastructure from this infrastructure chaining, or we can show you others. So what we found out talking to the community was when an article came out from some open source intelligence, a lot of people would come back to RiskIQ and search those indicators inside of our platform to find additional indicators that might not have been published or have came out since the publication. So what we did was we took that information that in these open source publications, and we pulled those out, because usually they're in an image, they're hard to get, you have to type them, you might make a mistake, and it took a lot of time. So we stripped all those out to make it very easy. So through our threat intel portal, when you search for something, we'll show you the articles. You don't have to have a question before coming to us. You can actually understand those things. Then what will happen is, if our threat investigators or researchers got additional information, we will add those to our articles. So then there'll be additional indicators in there. So then instead of starting off at the beginning again and trying to figure this out and build the infrastructure chain yourself, it's already further along, and you see more of that infrastructure all at one point. And we'll get into that very soon. So what's really cool is because everything is happening all the time, what we're doing is things that are dynamic. So we're actually figuring out the reputation score of the domains and IP. So if something's blocked today, it might be fine tomorrow. So we're able to go through and look at all those things and give you a score to say why we think this is neutral, it's good, it's suspicious, or it's malicious. And we're going to do those within the API script, the Jupyter Notebook script that we'll be doing. So when you think about operationalizing attack surface intelligence, looking at a hash to see if you have it, that's easy, or an IP address or a domain. Network host artifacts, they're okay. Tools, kind of hard to understand. And then the TTPs are really hard, but this is where we've been able to make this a lot easier for organizations. Now, what we're going to do here is we're going to talk about Kaseya. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to paste in all of these things, so then you can open them up and you can see them. And then we're going to walk through and do this investigation together. Okay. So give me a quick second. I'm just opening up.
And folks, you're going to see a big string of things come through the chat. We encourage you.
Don't worry.
Use the links that are put into the chat. You'll get carpal tunnel trying to type everything in that's directly on the slide, but we're still going to leave it up there. It's kind of like show your work. There it is. We've done the research. We've done the hunting around. We've improved some detection models to be able to find these concerns with Kaseya in a much broader sense than we thought originally, just because of its proliferation and what can piggyback on this particular vulnerability, and how easily it can be exploited and how distributable it really is.
Give me a second. I'm trying to paste and it's not letting me paste.
Oh, because you were in full screen.
Something was happening. It wasn't letting me paste into it.
Are there too many lines?
I don't know what happened. It's not letting me paste it anymore.
In the chat?
Yeah. Here, let me try again. Nope. So
okay. Let's maybe do a few at a time. Can we try that?
I'll try that. Let's see. Yep, it took those.
Okay, too many.
It might have been the amount that I was pasting in. Okay, I was panicking for a second.
Maybe Zoom saw it all, and they're like, "Hey, wait a second, I can see what you're putting in there." Danger.
No problem.
And
here we go. Okay, so what I want to talk about is Kaseya, and I'll show you a couple slides, and then we'll go through and we'll do these together. But I wanted to give you the links so you have them, and this will be also part of what we'll give you at the very end when we're all done. You'll get the PowerPoint, you'll get these links, so you can go through and see these on your own. So there was an article that came out from CISA that talked about this vulnerability in Kaseya, and Kaseya is used by mostly managed service providers or security providers to help customers administer their systems and potentially even their desktops and things like that. And this vulnerability, somebody could get into these servers if they were publicly exposed and potentially affect the clients of those people. And what they found out was threat actors, REvil was going in and installing ransomware on people and affecting them. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through and talk about this. So I went through and tried to do some investigation to see, what it looked like, what was happening, like how the screens look like. So this came from Krebs on Security, where this was a screenshot for somebody that got infected and their systems were placed under ransomware. So you can actually see what was happening here. So the big question becomes, okay, how big is this? Is it in my attack surface? And are there any other third-party attack surfaces that I have to worry about? So what we're going to do is I'm going to stop sharing this screen, and I'm going to bring up this real quick. This is all of those different URLs that we're going to take a look at.
Did you
So-
let the folks know about the pretty the graphic visualization that was behind that window, the Multigo?
Yeah, we'll get into it. So I
Yeah.
actually, one of the things that we did was someone published those different the Bitcoin wallets that money
Yeah.
was going to. So there was an article and there's a database out there where you can track these. So I went through and used that to see where the money was going. So we'll follow the money as well. So when you start off and you log into RiskIQ, here's the interface. So this is our threat intel portal. And just want to make sure that everyone is logged in. So can someone say, yes, you're logged in into the chat, just so I know that we're ready to go. Yep, people are saying yes. So if you take a look, I'm logged in as myself, you're logged into that other company. So you'll notice that I have 39 different third-party attack surfaces I'm using. I think you'll have 10. And the attack surface that I have is my own, and you're going to be under a managed service provider's attack surface. So yours is going to look a little bit different, but it's one of the third-party ones that I have. So when we get into those, I'll actually be in the same attack surface. So when we start off here, you don't have to, you can look at articles. So all these are the articles that are published, but what's really nice is that you have the capability of asking a question. So if I type in Kaseya into the search, you'll start to see hits, for example, on articles. And so this is a way for you to do research and understand what's been published, and if there's any additional things that like RiskIQ knows about. So for example, there were 8 public indicators, and there's an additional 6 that RiskIQ published. So there's that information where you get more of the picture, more of the infrastructure right away, okay? And so what we're going to do is, if we go to the next one, I clicked on the FBI briefing, the CISA briefing, and that was the one that was on the very bottom here, okay? And from in here, you can see how these articles are put together. So there's a reference, and this reference, if you open that up in another tab, I like to do it this way so I preserve all of the threads of my investigation. So think of it this way, that you're on a tree and you're at the trunk of the tree. When you go down the branch, it might end, and then you have to go back to the trunk and go down another branch. So I like to do it where I'm not just clicking on it, I'm opening a new window. And since I'm using Chrome, I can take all of those tabs and save them to a folder. So I kind of preserve those investigations. And that's what I did to make our life a little bit easier for today. So when you open this up, you actually can see the actual article. We show you where the source material came from. So you can actually go there and read it yourself. The other cool thing is that if you look at the indicators, here there were no public indicators were given for this particular article, but it talked about, linking to the CISA article that said, hey, there's a detection tool. This is what you should be doing. You should take these things offline, make sure that you have some mitigating controls or a VPN that you have to go through to talk to these systems, those types of things. Now, I also put in a link to BugCrowd, where they talked about this vulnerability and why it's important to make sure that they're offline and they're not accessible to the public through the internet. And so I put this in here just as reference for you. So like if you have these, or you have supply chain people that are using it and you find it inside of Passive Total that they're accessible, you can contact them and say, hey, this is why you need to take those down. So if we go back to into RiskIQ, we're going to do a search and find something. So what I did was, when you search for Kaseya inside of RiskIQ, we're going to do this a little bit different. So we did this as a component search, okay? So if I click on something, I'll show you how it works. So the way that I had it show up is that when you do a search initially, it will search the threat intel portal and look for articles and different things. When you do the advanced search will take you to this type of interface. Now, inside of this interface, I'll explain what it is, and then we'll go through and I'll paste this one in just so you can start off exactly where I am. okay? And then we'll edit this query and go and find the Kaseya systems that are out there on the internet. So really quick, I'll go through and talk about the interface. So this heat map shows 6 months worth of data, and each square represents 1 day. Each number in the square represents the number of unique IP addresses we saw on that day. If there is a little triangle in the corner, means something new appeared on that day. There's like a new IP address appeared there. So if you notice, there's curves on the bottom, curves on the top. If it's a curve on the top, it means it's the beginning of the month. A curve on the bottom means it's the end of the month. When we're doing investigations, we're not usually brought in right when it happened. It's usually after the fact, and sometimes we need to filter the data. So if we wanted to do that, I can come through and I can go into the heat map, and if I click on 1 day, I see just those resolutions. If I hold the shift key down now and click on another day, it will now show me that range of days, okay? If there is, on the data bar, if this is showing all the data that RiskIQ has. So I can go back in time to the very beginning and click, and now I'll see those results that were for that 6 month window of time, okay? And if I want to go back, I can either go back and click on the far right, or I can even just refresh the screen, and that will now give me reset to the current data that's there, okay? Now, one thing I want to mention is when you're searching for like a component, by default, it's doing all types of things. It's searching for all things. But if you click on this little magnifying glass here, you'll see that discover is there. That's usually to search everything, but you can also be very specific. So what I did here was I went to component, and now I type Kaseya. Okay. And now that I do this search, okay, it looked just for components that were out there that had the word Kaseya in. Now, from these results, you're going to see this is everything in the world that's out there that we've seen with our systems by crawling the internet and doing these direct observations. So if you notice, there's some that show July 14th. So today is the 15th. So this is from yesterday, okay? So and other ones show July 10th. So that might mean that they're no longer available there. That's where it stopped. So for example, if I'm looking for Microsoft Exchange, a certain version, and you've patched and now that version's changed, you might see a date where it stopped and a date where the new one started, okay? So if there is no date there, that means it's currently still there. So sometimes you might see the last seen with no date, which means, hey, it's still active. It hasn't stopped, okay? So any questions so far from the audience that's on anything that we've said, Ryan? Anything come in?
Nope, nothing that hasn't been answered.
Okay, so if you notice here, we have 913 IP addresses that have been found. Now I can come in and see 500 at a time. I can change the descending list and say I want to see 500, and that will now refresh it and show me 500 results. Now, one thing that I want to mention is you see right now in the component search for hosts, it shows 0. But if you click on it, this will now run that query to show you those results. So it only happens when you click on it, okay? So you have to click on it to make sure that there's no results there, okay? So just bear that in mind, okay? So if you notice here, we have some that were the 14th, some of the 13th. So we can see that there's 191 different domains that or hosts that we found with Kaseya on there. Now, this was a 0 day. So at the time, if you had Kaseya, you were vulnerable to this type of attack. And that's why it was so bad. And so if somebody can go through and figure out where these were, they could exploit them and do harm. Now, a lot of these organizations have already applied patches and things like that. Now, with our tracking, we weren't able to see the version of what's there just yet, but we're seeing that software is there, okay? That's why there's not a version number associated with it. Now, if you notice, there's a value on the far right. Now, that value if I click on that, we'll search just for those things. So if there was a specific version number, for example, I wanted to search for, I can go and click on the one that had that version number in there, and it will refresh and do a new query to show me that. So for example, if I came in and I clicked on Kaseya VSA, that's going to look for that specific type of component that we've discovered. And if there's a version number associated with that, version number would be in there. So this is just looking for any Kaseya VSA out there, okay? So there's 136 different hosts, and if I click on the IP, there's 544 VSA Kaseyas out there. So it's pretty big, okay? So now you can understand how big this is. And if any one of these was able to be seen on the internet like this, there's a great potential that you could access it and exploit it and affect all the customers underneath it, okay? Which is why these threat actors started to do this, okay? Now, the next question is, you now know how big it is in the world. It's a pretty big problem, and each one of these could have many, 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 or hundreds of customers or clients underneath them, because these were used by managed service providers, okay? So the next question will come to your mind is, do we have this? We have to worry about this? So if you come into, if you click on RiskIQ, you'll see the My Attack Surface there. So go ahead and click on that, okay? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the third-party attack surface that is linked to your company's, your login's attack surface. So just give me a second.
Which again is going to be a managed service provider, right?
Correct.
But I mean, if I have a managed service provider, am I not like connected to their other customers by way of that, in between link to where like those aren't third parties of mine, but they're third parties of my third party.
It could be. It could be. Yeah. So for example, this case, you're basically the managed service provider. So you're looking at your own infrastructure to see, hey, do I have this? Do I need to worry about this? Because this is a bad vulnerability that could affect all of our clients. And if our clients got ransomware, do we have backups? What's the loss of business to them? Are they going to come to us and say, why was your Kaseya machine accessible from the internet? There's liability concerns, okay?
Yeah, well, and a lot of people just, let's face it, lots and lots and lots of money. I don't have the exact figure, but it's got to be at this point in the tens of millions.
It's over 10 million.
People have paid the ransoms, right?
Yeah.
I mean, where's that going to after?
Right, it's over 10 million, and we're going to show that in a little bit, okay? So now that I'm in here, I'm in my attack surface, okay? So this is my organization's attack surface. So think of this as like your morning cup of coffee. You're going to log into Illuminate, and you're going to go into your attack surface. Things in high severity are things that you need to take care of right away, okay? These are critical things to your organization. The medium things might be things that you might have to talk to another group and take care of. So maybe a certificate that's expiring. And the low severity might be, hey, you have a deprecated Apache and it's really old. There might not be a vulnerability to it, but it's old. And if it's been years since it's been fixed, there's probably going to be a vulnerability that could come out that could affect your systems. And you might need to look at, getting rid of that or upgrading it, okay? So think of those three types of buckets. So I'm not going to click into the priorities yet. I'm going to go through and explain what's on the screen so you get a good understanding. And then we're going to go look at the vulnerabilities. So the next piece is your attack surface. This is what RiskIQ, it's uncurated. So we gathered this by collection of how we gather our data and made this grouping of assets that we say is yours, okay? It hasn't been curated where you can say, take this out, add this. This is just what we've done by machine. Now, on the right-hand side, you'll see newly added hosts. So this is new things that have been added over the last 30 days. So if somebody, a rogue employee or department created something and threw it up there and used information that belongs to you, like, for example, they register it with their corporate email address or something, these types of things will start showing up. So you'll see these things. As you're spinning up VMs and tearing them down and moving infrastructure around, as we're collecting this data, this is where it would show up. Then we look at the distribution of the web technologies, okay, and the frameworks. And we're going to see in here when we look at other ones, other data that's in there, the cloud adoption. So this one's using AWS and DigitalOcean, okay? Now, if any article hit based upon anything that was published that's in your attack surface, you're going to see this under vulnerabilities and exposures. So like just by going to your attack surface, the thousands of articles that get put in all the time, you'll be able to see, hey, was there a hit on something that I should be aware of? Because you can't read all of them. And this is a way to filter that vast amount of knowledge and data that gets on the internet all the time from open source intelligence to see if there's a hit on something, okay? So that's where that would be. The sensitive services are the critical ports that we've seen open, okay? So this would be like SSH, Telnet, RDP, Postgres, FTP, all those types of things that you would want to know about. Hey, do we have FTP that's open? Why is that? It's unsecured, you'll be able to see that. Then the other one is like the compliance and hygiene to look to see what certificates you have, when they're expiring, if they expired, so you can see what's happening. And then the IP reputation is when we understand like, hey, there was phishing, there was malware, there was a DDoS, any of those types of stuff that have happened from your infrastructure. And that will be listed there, okay? And if you click on these things, you'll start to see data coming in. So now that you have that overview of the attack surface information, this applies to you and any other attack surfaces that are in your third parties. It's all the same way. So it's an apples to apples comparison. So if we look at the high severity, okay? So if we look, we got a hit on two things. Okay, so if I read more, I can see the CISA FBI advisory and the advisory from Kaseya. So if I click on this, now this brings up that information, but it shows me the hits for why this happened as well. So for example, because we're gathering this data and putting it together and it's all automated, if you take a look at the discovery sources, it will tell you, hey, it's part of your domain. That's why we said it's yours. And it has Kaseya VSA on it. That's why it's listed there, okay? So it's a way for you to quickly understand the critical priorities that you need to handle within your organization. It might not be you're the vuln guy, but you're the threat intel or the incident response. If you got popped, you're going to be brought in, but wouldn't it be better to let the vuln people know that, hey, this critical vulnerability is out. We have it in our environment. It's on this domain and this IP. Take care of it right now and call the network group and say, hey, you need to turn off access from the internet to get to this server because it was discovered on the internet. And the only way it can be discovered if we could talk to it, okay? Now, the next step from here is if I come in and I right click and I open this, this will kick off, hold on one second. It's behind the little Zoom window. So if I click on this now, this is running the advanced search inside of Illuminate. So inside of here, I get that data bar with all the information, the heat map. I get to see that that was the same name that was there. So we discovered the IP and the domain. That's why they were both listed. So we talked to both, okay? So then from inside of here, I got the who is information. And if we take a look at the who is information, yeah, it's the company. So we know it belongs to you. We also understand all the certificates that are here, okay? We look at the components. So now we can see, hey, it's running Kaseya app server and VSA, okay? So it's running both of those. The host pairs, this is what's going in and out of all these things. And we see it's listing to the same thing. So it's calling things from itself. We can look at the reverse DNS for it, and we can look at the services. And when we look at the services, when we go through some of these examples, you might see like the banners. So we actually bring back the banner information, and that helps with our detection. So when we look at a threat actor, if a threat actor sets up something a certain way, we're able to look at not only the components that are installed, but maybe the banners and other pieces, the certificates, and the locations and all that stuff to fingerprint that threat actor very well. And so we'll go through and we'll take a look at, a little bit deeper into those. But now I understand that I have this issue in my own environment, okay? So now I know how big it is in the world. and I know that I have this problem, so I know now I need to take care of this. Now, the next question that would come up from an executive that might have said, hey, I saw this Kaseya ransomware. Do we have to worry about it? You would have to go through and dig through and try to find out if you had it. It could take you a long time, and you could be popped before it happens or already been compromised. So now you know you have this issue. And if it was prior to all of these patching and you hadn't patched, now you're in panic mode trying to fix this. But the next question is, my supply chain. How do I understand if my supply chain has this or not? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring up another browser. Go ahead.
No, you just bring up a fine point about the supply chain and just that connectivity. I mean, that the internet is the new attack surface, right?
Correct.
And what's interesting from that, again, from that sort of attacker psychology standpoint, is that these aren't necessarily the domain exclusive to the state-sponsored types.
Correct.
Right? With this sort of continuous round-the-clock vulnerability and easy pathways to exploit through relationships on the internet, like a Kaseya relationship via an MSP, it becomes a lot of opportunism. It becomes the opportunity for anyone and just about everyone with a few skills to commandeer these types of things or to exploit a vulnerability. And like you said, this is publicly available information, right? This is information that we've taken the opportunity ourselves to gather it, analyze it, and present it in this way. But these are now attacks that are completely within the domain of skills for so many more than just nation states.
Right. And it's the food chain is dropped down. Brandon, did you have something to say?
Yeah, there's another element too that I think we often gloss over because we have the technology, but just the notion of what do I own as a business.
Right.
We talk about digital transformation and using cloud-based services. The majority of the time when we engage with clients or prospects or even our customers, they often come to us and say, well, I believe I know what we have. But what they don't realize is all that shadow IT, the unmanaged IT that they forgot about, or a particular department that maybe stood up infrastructure for an event, they're not tracking that. And that could be the difference between a breach where a 0-day or even an older vulnerability is successful simply because they don't even know that the machine's out there.
Yeah.
So I think we take for granted this notion of assessing the greater impact of the internet and how that relates to me, but that really is the power of RiskIQ and what it is that we're trying to achieve. Kind of taking the mystery out, what you own on the internet, and making it so that it's something that you can actually manage and put into your operations.
So one of the things I want to show you is, as I'm going through and I was building these things, I was thinking as the person that would have to do this investigation. So I tried to put myself in your shoes and say, okay, what am I going to do? How am I going to do this? What are the steps I would have to go through to be able to figure out this data? And if you didn't have Illuminate, it'd be really difficult and it might not be accurate. Who knows if your last vuln scan touched everything or you had information for it. So you're going to have gaps and you're only as good as your last scan, but we're continuously doing this. It's constant monitoring. So it's always updated. So now that I found out that I have this issue with Kaseya, I want to look at my third parties. So right now, when you go through and you want to look for that particular vulnerability in your third parties, I have to go through and click on every single third party here. And I have to go look to see if there's a hit for that. But I'm going to show you with the API how to automate it. So what I did was I saw something in our environment where it was good, but I had to go through and click through a lot of stuff. And I wanted to make it faster and a way for me to immediately have this information. So I worked with Mark Kendrick, who works at our organization, and he helped me write a script to be able to automate it. And we'll run it in real time to be able to see this Kaseya against all these organizations at once to see if we get that hit. But for us in the GUI right now, and this is we're constantly making updates and changes to our software. But for right now, the way that you would look for that particular insight is you have to go into the organization, go into the insight screen and find that insight. Okay. So right now we know it was a high insight. So I would have to go through for each one of these and click on it and click inside of here and look to see if I have that. I'm just going to Command F and say, do I have any hits on it? No. So this one's okay. So now I have to go back and I have to go through each and every one of those to be able to see it. Okay. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to show you the script. Okay. And we'll go through and I'll explain what it is. And if you want a copy of this script, let us know. And when we send out the other docs, we will send you a blank copy of the script that you can utilize. And this is running within Jupyter Notebook with pandas. Okay. So give me a quick second. I'm going to fire this one up. Okay. So my question was, hey, there has to be a more efficient way that if an organization had hundreds of third parties that we were monitoring, how can I effectively and quickly go through and to see, does this exist in that workspace? And if it does, can you give me the data for it? So I'm going to fire this up, and here's a workbook. Okay. So one section we did was on threat intelligence. So when we get into threat intelligence, I'll come back and I'll talk about that. So in the API that we've just updated, you can pull in the attack surface of yourself and all of your third parties, and you can bring in the cyber threat intelligence if you have the cyber threat module. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to run this. So I'm going to come in here and say, run everything. And you're going to see this in real time. So you're going to see how fast the data came back. So wherever there's a star, it's currently running an asterisk. So you're going to see in a couple seconds. So it grabbed all the data on Cobalt Strike. So that's up above. And then we're going to start getting into the attack surface piece. Okay. So let's see.
And what's important to note here is that these notebooks are utilizing our API. So if you're leveraging our products and the user interface and you say to yourself, I like the data, I think it's super valuable, but my day-to-day operations is not going to be spent inside this interface. I really need this to work within my own custom tool or another tool. The good news is that we have a partner program that I presently run called RiskIQ Interlock, in which we integrate with a number of different security tools across a number of different verticals, including vulnerability, asset management, threat intelligence, EDR, etc. So the other thing here as well is just the APIs are pretty easy to use and develop against. And we have some Python bindings that I shared earlier that just makes using command line tools to get at this information another alternative. So we will share the scripts out with everybody. I see Chris's question there. But what's important to note here is regardless of whether or not you want to use our interface, there's a way for you to access this information and plumb it into your existing security investments.
Right. So what I did here was I used my RiskIQ credentials for our org for what we're seeing. And we had 39 different orgs. And so that we had in our third parties that we're looking at. So it was a little bit more than what you had. I wanted to show that, hey, it's over broad spectrum of accounts, different types of ISPs and managed service providers, things like that. I wanted to get a lot of data. So if we take a look at this, it looked at our own attack surface and said, hey, what do I have here? So this is the list of all of the active insights. So it looked at the high, medium, and low and said, just give me the ones that have data in it. And that's this right here, okay? And here's a list of what those are. So I can go through and say, also show me all of the third-party attack surfaces I have. And so I ran this one, and this is now showing me all the third-party attack surfaces I was looking at. And then I went through, yes?
Can you increase your font size just for,
sure.
It's readable, but just.
No problem. Let me go back up.
There we go. There we go.
Okay. So I looked at my attack surface. So you can see, hey, this is looking at my own, and these are the active insights that I have in my own attack surface. So this is for RiskIQ. And then I looked at all of the third-party attack surfaces that I have, and these are all the ones that we have here. So the next thing I went through and I said, hey, look at the one that you have, which is your attack surface, and let me know if what that ID number was. And then from that ID number, I could put inside of here, hey, tell me, the high, medium, and low count of what I have, and give me a list of all of the active things that were there. Okay. And then I printed out the one for the ransomware one that we saw in the insight, and give me those two. Give me the output of what was in those results in the GUI, and that's what you see here. Okay, so the next piece is I wanted to run through and say, hey, how can I speed this up? I want to make this now that I can look at all of my attack surfaces and see if I get a hit on that. Okay, so when we went through, you can see Charter and Comcast got a hit for those. Okay, so if I come through, I can say, show me all the IPs or host names that hit for that particular thing with Comcast. Okay, and here's all the ones that hit for Charter Communications. So I saw those too. So now this is a way for I can automate this, and if I was this is part of my supply chain, I can have this as part of a workbook or something that I can throw into our ticketing system, and even contact those people and say, hey, you have this problem, take care of it. But the nice thing about this is that as these things gets remediated, they're no longer an insight. They fall off. So you can verify, trust but verify your supply chain. So instead of them telling you, yeah, we're okay, we don't have to worry about this, and you can see it because we're showing you the direct observation. So when we tell you something, it's based upon a direct observation. Anything you want to add, guys?
No, you said it really well. I'm
Yeah.
actually doing it on my side over here. So I'm getting, I'm
Okay.
also a participant, people. So no, really. Sorry, Brandon, you were saying?
No, I think the only thing that I've mentioned here is like those Python bindings that I've shared out earlier in the chat. We're going to continue to invest in those and continue to push these attack surface APIs, which are relatively new, into the tooling, and ensure that if you want to run more complicated filtering or do Boolean logic or cut it down and slice and dice the data in your own way, that's going to be, yet just another way to kind of visualize and interact with the data and plumb it into the rest of your business.
Right. And the cool thing about this is that if you have a process that you go through to do an investigation or do something, if you create like a Jupyter notebook, all the data is stored with it. Okay. But it's something that you can give to somebody that's junior, and they can run it and get the same results every single time without making a mistake. And so it's a way for you to take that tribal knowledge that might be in one person's head or a group's head and give it out to the organization so it can be leveraged by everybody. And when they run it and they get a hit, for example, they can then contact you, hey, I got a hit on this. It's not you having to run it every time or do that investigation. So that's something to bear in mind with these types of Jupyter notebooks and things. It might make your life easier in the long run. It's a little bit difficult maybe to set it up initially, but once it's set up, it's done. So now that this is set up, I can look for any vulnerability. I can go through and say, tell me this one, tell me that one, and it's done. It's very easy to edit and to get those results consistently. And I can run it every day and see if the count changes. If it's getting better, it's getting worse. So pandas is a module that formats. So that's the Panda piece that goes along with this. So so that's like if I came in here and I did a .t and I reran this, it would change the format. So that's how that's just a way to format the data, to make it easier for people to visualize.
Yeah, and again, there's a lot of questions coming through. Just want to clarify all the exercises and such we will be sharing out, including the scripts and so forth, as well as the recording of today. So you kind of go back and rewatch it in terms of, and share it with colleagues and others that again want to make the internet safer. But yeah, we're going to be sharing out a lot of these materials. One way to make sure you use it is we're going to burn down the lab today, folks, after we're done here. So to re-access everything, you will need to go and activate the trial, which extends for 30 days. So that way you can keep using it. It won't be this lab environment, but even better, it'll be your own. So it won't be, this third-party MSP, for example, as the attack surface you're originating from. It'll be your own. So it'll probably be even more applicable. And yes, we're going to send out all the scripts. Brandon, you put the GitHub in there, right?
Yeah.
In the chat. Okay. So
GitHub in there, and I'm actually linking directly to some of the further documentation that's within GitHub as well that references the attack surface information that Benjamin's showing, along with the insights and pulling the data out. The same way in which we're visualizing that within the Jupyter notebook, that could also be visualized on the command line as well.
Right. It's the sky's the limit on the capabilities. If you can think of the way that you want to flow for your investigation, you can script it out. And if it sees this, then do this. You know, you can create all those types of scenarios.
Yeah. And as you and I were talking about this yesterday, as we were getting ready for today, and all the exercises and stuff, you know, the age-old statement of follow the money. And
right.
you know, we say this every intro, like that whole world that I did, and this is like years ago when cryptocurrency was a new thing. But seeing it as this underground economy that it is like the oxygen for. And so
that was my question. So like when you see how big this is and how easy it was for people to get popped because it was a 0 day, the question was, well, why are they doing it? How much money are they making out of it? So I did a search and I found this cool article that just came out on the 12th. So just a couple days ago. Mm-hmm. And I pasted them all in so you can see them. And it was talking about Ransomware Tracker. And this Ransomware Tracker, basically, when somebody gets ransomwared, you can upload an image of the screen like we saw in the Krebs on security, which has the information about which wallet to pay to and what they're asking for. And then basically what it's doing is it's letting you understand where that money is going. So because it's blockchain, it's all public, and you can look to understand which wallet paid which wallet. If you know the bad guy's wallet, you can see what goes into it and what goes out of it. Okay. So right now we're looking at $12,134,000 they've received out of ransomware. Okay. Mm-hmm. So you go, if someone's making $12 million, they're going to continue to do this. So these threat actors are getting paid. And because they're getting paid, they're incentivized to do this. If they didn't get paid, then there would be no incentive for them to do it, but they're getting paid. Okay. So they made, as of today, right now, 12 million bucks. So this website had something pretty cool. And if you went in and you typed in REVIL.
Does that have 2 E's?
No.
Did it change?
VIL. Let's see. I think I might have to click on something else. I said browse data, and then I do. Here we go. Is it here? It's no longer listed.
But it's in the.
It's in there. So what I did was I took the ones that were listed, and I found the actual blockchain, the wallets that were used. So what I wanted to do was to see, what can I do with it? How can I see what came in, what came out? So I use Maltego sometimes to visualize data, and Maltego has a nice transform to look at blockchain. And I said, hey, it would be really cool to be able to look at some of like 2 of these transactions. Okay. So I'll walk you through how it looks like. And this is in the slides as well. Mm-hmm. So I looked at one of the wallets and I said, who paid into those wallets? So if you come in here and you right click, you can say inbound transaction to blockchain. So these were the inbound transactions to this wallet. Okay. And then I went through and I said, let me look at the outbound transactions. Like, where did this money go? It went into one wallet, but that threat actor generally won't keep it in that one wallet. He's going to distribute it out and try to mix it up all over the world. Okay. So I did that a couple times. And if you notice inside of here, it went to like a whole bunch of different chains, different wallets. Okay. And when I did it, there was a total of 5 different ones. All of them started putting money into the same ones. Okay. So they bounced around, but they all ended up in these same wallets. Now, people think this is really anonymous. Like, hey, if I use cryptocurrency, no one can tell what's happened. Well, they know what's going in and what's going out. They see those things. They just don't know who owns that particular wallet. But if they can figure that out, then they know where the money left and went to the real world, or where you transfer the money. So these threat actors are leveraging this Bitcoin, but they get found. They get found out.
It's also worth noting, it's not in this particular example, but RiskIQ has an extensive amount of transforms as well.
Correct.
That again utilize the APIs that we have available to pull in our data and give you link visual graphs. So as you're performing investigations or analysis, you'll be able to see that. And it is worth noting that the RiskIQ Illuminate APIs that we recently launched back in April are not fully worked into the Maltego transforms yet, but that's something that we're actively working on right now. So soon you'll be able to take the information about your attack surface, assets that are impacted by a particular vulnerability, or information about a particular threat actor, and visualize that within the graph itself.
Correct. So if we had an IP address, we can go in and say, hey, give me more information about it. Show me, create the blockchain. So create the infrastructure chain. So it's those types of things that we can easily do. Now, so this becomes a way of now understanding how big it is, how the threat actors have made money off of it. They made over $12 million. So now you understand the impact and what this entails for the world. So the next question is now that we have this information, who else is doing this? We know of this one threat actor, but doing the research, I found that there was another group that was coming across it. So give me a quick second. Follow the money. So inside of here, you'll notice I have these graphs for you so you can see it. And then we're going to do the thing where fake Kaseya. So what was happening is people were panicking, going, I need to patch Kaseya. So threat actors started to say that they have the patch, or adding Cobalt Strike to some of these places where the patches were. So when you would install, you would get Cobalt Strike on your machines, and then they would start to attack you. Okay. So what we're going to do now is do this investigation where we're looking at the fake Kaseya, where it was dropping Cobalt Strike. And we're going to do this from an incident perspective. Like when you do this investigation, you're going to look to say, does anybody internally, have they communicated to any of these places? And we're going to take that internal information and marry it with the external information to get the full picture of what's happening so you can protect your organizations. Okay.
And again, I'll probably defer to Brandon here, but when it comes to that internal information, what you're talking about there is a lot of endpoint telemetry.
Correct.
Which again, we're very community driven and very focused on collaborating and integrating with lots of different parties. And so, Brandon, I'm sure you can speak more to that, of the various endpoint providers and EPP, endpoint protection platforms that we work with, and share a little bit more there about that internal telemetry.
Yeah, of course. We'll get to that, I think, in the demo where we have CrowdStrike and Microsoft that we can show some communications on the particular infrastructure. The one comment that I just wanted to make here was just reiterating some of what I was saying in the chat on Zoom. The attackers over the past 6 months have really broadened up their operations from being less targeted and more opportunistic to exploit things on the internet. That's been the overarching theme of today's workshop. What I think is super interesting with the Kaseya vulnerability is that, one, it's extremely fresh, right? So it's still changing. And what I also think is interesting is just how quickly attackers were able to do that widespread exploitation, capitalize on it, and then the community was able to respond and try to get a patch out. But at the same time, the attackers were also able to respond, setting up this fake infrastructure. And so what I think we're starting to see is that the playing field is becoming a bit skewed, in that attackers can easily do these sorts of things that sow chaos into an already stressful situation for responders. And so it's at the utmost importance that you have to always be vigilant and have tools like this to be able to verify whether or not you're looking at something legitimate or something that could be a further compromise or a secondary compromise by a different actor.
Yeah. So this is the real world stuff that we're dealing with. So this is like why I tried to pick this type of scenario, because you might have gone through this manually yourself. So if we go back, and I put all the links in so you can take a look at what's there. So if we started back in the RiskIQ Illuminate interface through the threat portal, and we searched for Kaseya, there was an article that popped up. And if you take a look, it's the first article that listed. So when we look at this one, if we right click and open up this in another tab, you'll see the actual article. But one of the things I wanted to mention was, when you think about like how we look at data and how we try to partner with people, we try to make it in such a way that as you do your investigation, you understand what's happening internally without having to jump around. So we can reduce the time it takes for you to make a decision. So if we reduce that time and the data is accurate and the data gives you good value, it makes your life easier in the long run. Do I have to worry about this, or do I need to like drop everything, take care of something, or do something? I need to fire up my authenticator real quick, and give me a quick second. I am going to log in so I can have this ready. I forgot to do that. I apologize. Give me a quick second. Okay, let me put in my code. Two-factor authentication is awesome. Give me a second. Okay. I'm in. Okay. So let's go through and start looking at these indicators and seeing what's happening. Okay. So there were a couple indicators in here. There were 2 IP addresses that were in the public indicators. Okay. And there was a hash, and then there's some RiskIQ ones. So if you right click on these and open them up in other tabs, okay, you'll start to see what's there. And if you look at the RiskIQ indicators, let's open up the last one. So you have to say show more, and let's open up the USPSorderstatus.com. Whenever I see these types of things, you pretty much know they're bad, but I want to take a look at it. So I'm going to open that one up in another tab. Okay. So by looking at these IP addresses, I have CrowdStrike running in my environment. So under my organization, we have it set up where it's pulling all the CrowdStrike intelligence and seeing what's happening on the endpoints. We also have Microsoft enabled as well. So we're getting the Defender and Azure Sentinel information as well coming in. So the very first piece I want to mention is at the very top, we have Analyst Insights. So Analyst Insights are like the questions that an analyst might have when you look at something, trying to help you make that determination. Is it good? Is it bad? And we try to give you that right away. These are the questions that might have been at the top of mind. And so when we talk to the over 100,000 community members, the type of things they were asking for was, yeah, when you see an IP or domain, you don't really know if it's good or bad. What can you help us with to help us get to that information quickly, to know if it's something that we really need to care about or something that it's a non-issue. So first of all, by going to this IP address, it tells me, hey, that there's it's been blocked by RiskIQ. Now, if I ran this query in the threat intel portal, I would get a reputation score, and we're going to run that as well. But I want to show you in the advanced interface what you see. It tells you if it's a Tor exit node or not. It tells you, hey, what was the last day a port was open that we saw? Oh, it was 6 days ago. Hey, when was the last time that we observed this host? Has there been a change? Have there been a subdomain? But you'll notice that there's these black ones over here. So this is CrowdStrike's threat intelligence that's coming in to say, I have more information about this threat, and I'm going to display it on the screen for you. Okay. So by you just searching for something in the interface, it's pulling that data across. Okay. So the next question, when you go through and you take a look at this, is what else can I find about it? So we look at the WHOIS data. So if we look at the WHOIS data, we go, okay, going back to the first time that we got information, we have it that we have an individual. We look and we see what's changed. It's a Gmail account.
Hey, Benjamin, would you mind
yeah.
just increasing your font again?
Yeah.
Oh, no problem.
Looks
I'm
like a
sorry.
preset there.
Okay.
There we go.
Okay, so it gives us all this information, and the nice thing is that once you get a license from RiskIQ, you have access to the history of the whois, not just the current record. So if you're using a free account, you're only going to see the current record. If you use one of the paid accounts, you get access to the history that we have on this whois record. Now, we can see here over time how it's changed and what's happening with it. Now there's no certificates, there's 11 components associated with it. So it's running Ubuntu, CentOS, OpenSSH, PHP. But as we go down, we will see that, hey, in the CrowdStrike tab, because I have that enabled, I'm seeing some data. And what I see is that this desktop, okay, hit it twice on the same day. So you go, oh, so now I know an internal system had gone out and talked to this, okay? Now, the other cool thing that I want to show is that just from here, okay, just from looking at this, I can activate the CrowdScrape, and CrowdScrape will go and grab these indicators and do a query for me. So if I came here and I kick this off, I say open a scan, and I say, okay, graph this, I can immediately know if anybody internally talked to any of those things. So I can see, hey, that one desktop did talk to 2 different IP addresses that were listed in that article, and there was that hash was associated with Pinchy Spider. Okay, so immediately I have that intelligence. So now I can know I need to talk to somebody internally and go, hey, you need to isolate this machine. We need to see what they did, what's happening with it, and I can now start to triage and take care of that machine. Now, if I go back, I want Brandon to talk about the Microsoft stuff, and we can do a little bit different stuff, a little more advanced things with Microsoft.
Yeah, so the Microsoft integration that we have is with 2 different products. It's with Azure Sentinel, which is their SIEM offering, and it's with Microsoft Defender for Endpoint, which would be somewhat analogous to what CrowdStrike does. And so Benjamin has clicked on the Microsoft tab here. In the case of Azure Sentinel, we're not showing an alert because the SIEM itself, or our demo SIEM, doesn't have an alert for this. But on the Microsoft Defender side, we can see that one system, Winbox, actually communicated with this infrastructure, and that was last seen yesterday. And we can see the internal IP address that was used, the external IP address, and we get some level of like risk and exposure score as per the Microsoft APIs. And again, what we're able to see through things, through Defender is just like this level of detail, and if there's any specific alerts that were generated beyond that activity that we observed. Now, what's nice about the Microsoft Solution Suite is that we have a number of controls available to us as well. So we have the capacity to actually block this indicator across the organization, submit that, and ensure that if we know that this thing is 100% bad, we click on that button, it pushes it out to the entire fleet and ensures that no one else can get access to it. And in the event that someone does try to get access, we'll again see that machine show up under this tab right here. One of the things that we are adding is completing the loop on Azure Sentinel as well. So we'll soon have a button there that won't be block, but instead will be alert for the particular IOC that you're looking at. And the value there is if you're leveraging that SIEM and you want to generate some incidents based on the telemetry that you identified performing your investigation within RiskIQ Illuminate, you can ad hoc push those indicators directly into Sentinel, create rules within the system, and ensure that you get incidents created. Yeah. So this is probably for another day, but if you're interested, I will post in our channel both the CrowdStrike and Microsoft integration pages that have the joint solution briefs, the details of how to get started, how to access and set up those systems so that you can start taking advantage of the capabilities.
Yeah. So what this is doing, it's merging your internal telemetry with our external telemetry. Just like we showed you that circle diagram in the beginning with the device and the internet, this is marrying the 2 together, okay? So this is a game changer for organizations because generally you had very good telemetry inside, but once it went outside, you didn't know what's happening, or the threat actor is not coming from that domain or IP. It's a different one. But if we're able to track it and see it, then we're able to really understand this. Okay. So what that article talked about. So if we took a look at the article that was out here, they start to mention that hey, it's dropping Cobalt Strike. They know that this vulnerability existed, but they're trying to get a foothold into the organization so they can do other things later on, or exfiltrate data or do bad things within the organizations. So one of the things that RiskIQ allows us to do is not only look at these types of indicators, but look at the tooling that's out there as well. So the version or the credential that you're using to log in today doesn't have access to this, but I'll show you through my interface. So under the threat intel, okay, we handle this a little bit different. Okay, so Josh always says this, sums it up this way, and I like the way he says it. We're not just telling you that the threat actor's favorite color is blue and likes to take long walks on the beach and likes to attack financial institutions in this geographic location. We're actually giving you more information. Go ahead. Yeah.
By moonlight.
By moonlight.
By moonlight. Okay.
We're looking at the infrastructure and we're looking at the tooling that's there. So for example, if we look at the tooling, we have Cobalt Strike. So if I click on this, okay, you can see all the different threat actors that are using this tooling to go after organizations. And we give you the background that tells you about it, okay? But the difference is in the pudding. And because we have direct observations, and it's not based upon, just a chat room and what they saw and what they heard, this is what we've seen, like boots on the ground. So there are 2,453 open source intelligence markers talking about Cobalt Strike. So IPs, domains, hashes, things like that. Well, RiskIQ has an additional 8,106, okay, based upon our direct observations on the internet. So,
and that's today, and that number continues to change when it comes to the observations that they unfold moment by moment.
Correct. So the cool thing about this is that when we look at this, let me bring up the where is the CTI? Hold on. I'll bring up that the CTI again. So at the very top, remember I said, hey, I'll get back to this. So if I brought in the different threat actors, I can pull out these indicators. So I told it, hey, go grab everything from Cobalt Strike and bring those in. So those 10,000 indicators are here. So I could have a script run that says, hey, put this into my SIM if anybody communicates this, but also block it. No one should be talking to these things or getting any communication from these. So this list can be constantly running and updating my different tools to protect my organization. So this is like the vaccine or the inoculation against these tools. So as we're finding more and more of this infrastructure, it doesn't matter which threat actor is using it, we're identifying the infrastructure wherever it is in the world. And once we see it and it gets on the list, you can leverage that list to protect your organization. And that's the difference. It's not just telling you this threat actor is bad and this is the description of them. And if you see them on the street, be really careful. We're saying this is where the person is. Anything going to or from this bad stuff, you don't want. So don't go there and block it and don't let it come to you. So that's the protection. And that's the difference with the way that we're handling the threat intelligence. Anything you want to add, Brandon, with that?
No, sorry, I was just responding to
Okay.
Boris's question, and so I think it is a good one, and I'll highlight it. He asked, how is this different from like a BitSight security scorecard or risk recon? And my response is in there, but the very quick high level view is that those risk rating companies are trying to set a standard similar to like a credit score for evaluating risk. And what we found when we rolled out a similar product many years ago was that risk is very relative to the organization. Some organizations, because of compliance, are forced to look at an SSL certificate expiring with the same level of severity as potentially even a zero-day exploit because they could be fined. And other businesses simply care about threat actors that may actually just be going after specific technologies that they're running. And what we found with the risk ratings is that people want to be able to customize that. They want to be able to understand, how the attack surface can be managed, not just told that they're doing a poor job or a great job, They want to actually be able to see the assets behind that, to be able to observe over time how that changes, and most importantly, and for larger organizations, to understand what's most important. And having threat intelligence dictate that is, I think, is one of the key differences that we bring versus some of those other competitors. I will say that we don't really view them as competition per se. We often do have clients that may start with those services because they are a bit cheaper to purchase, but they often come to us before the ability to manage and the deep technical insight that we bring. Right. So longer-winded answer. I think it's important though to note, just because the way that we tackle the problem is vastly different than what we see other folks do in the market.
So, and that brings up the point where I said I'll go back and run it from the beginning interface, the threat intel portal. So the IP address that was in the article, if you ran that IP address, this is what you would see. So you get a reputation score. So we're saying, hey, it's malicious, but we're telling you why it's malicious. It's not just a score. It's what makes up that score. And it's because, hey, it was on a block list. It's been in 2 articles talking about a threat. Hey, there was a web component there that has been observed as being potentially malicious. And there's some open ports that indicate maybe it's malicious, some suspicious stuff. And based upon that, that's why we gave it the score of 100% of being malicious. So when you look at those other people, they give you a score, but you go, well, why is that score here? Well, we can't tell you. It's secret sauce. Well, if you got a score on a third party and the person goes, no, I don't agree with this score, there's no way for you to see apples to apples and see why. But with RiskIQ, you can actually see why that is that way. And you can say, hey, it's because it's been blocked. It's been, you have malware on there. It's been something. And when those things, and these are dynamic, every single time you run it, it recalculates, redoes it. So if it changes over time, this score will change over time.
Yeah. And that speaks to that multidimensionality too, right? A lot of the score, again, nothing against the scorecard and the scoring ratings and such, but they're looking for factors that go into their formula, right? And so many times there are things that you might care about or that are indicative of attack, compromise, or an exposure of some kind that they don't serve as factors in the ratings formula. And so they're ignored, or they're collected and just not produced, not published. We just take another angle, which is observe everything and then serve it up. And then allow the threat analyst and the security team to then discover what's important to them with all the real observations. So here are all the facts, and here's our view of where it fits in terms of a reputation score, showing our work, not necessarily only gathering and only collecting things that factor into some formula we've cooked up. So just for what it's worth.
Yeah, and so if we go back into that article where we got these indicators to begin with, you notice here that there's virus total, any run, and hybrid analysis. What this will do is link out to those different providers to run that query for those things. So I did it for the hybrid analysis on the hash and the SHA-1 and the 256 hash. So when you look at it, you get those results. So then sometimes when you do an investigation, when something's detonated or something happens, there's new indicators that you only see from it being sandboxed and understanding those things. So it's a good idea to go and look at these things to see if there's new avenues of investigation that you might need to go down that you didn't know about. So this is a way for you to have these accounts and go and search the data that you see in those tools to bring the data back. And that's why we use all these different tools. We don't just stay within our platform because we know you don't. When you do your investigation, you're trying to bring all the sources of truth to bear to give you all the information that you need to be able to isolate and make a good decision on what you need to do for your organization. And so that's why we do these workshops, to expose you to these types of issues and threats that are out there, and to walk through what an investigator might need to do to be able to come up with a determination and to protect their organizations. And if you have experiencing with training your eye to see these things and understand what's out there, then when these issues come up, you know how to address them faster and better and more efficiently, and then be able to educate your peers on what you found and what's happening. And that's why we have such a big community. And that's why we do this, is because we want your feedback. We want your knowledge to be able to make the internet a safer place. And the way that we do that is by exposing you to these real world, real events, live data, direct observations, and give you the ability to look at the world, but have the lens to say, I want to see how this affects me and my organization, or these third parties, or show me the view of the bad guy. Tell me where they are. Because if you know where they are, you now are prepared to know what's going there, what's coming there from your organization or from your third parties to protect you. Now, one thing I wanted to mention was there was an article that just came out on the 14th, so just yesterday, that China has ruled that all zero-day vulnerabilities found by their threat people that are finding vulnerabilities have to be given to the Chinese government. So they're going to have all these 0 days out there that they're only going to know about, because if their researchers find it, by law, they have to give it to them. And I want to leave on a good note, on a happy note, okay? So there was an article that just came out, and let me just put this down. So the group that we were just looking at has disappeared online. So President Biden spoke to Vladimir Putin the other day and said, hey, you need to do something about this. And this infrastructure has now stopped, but it's good and bad. So it's good that it's not there anymore, but it's bad because you can't decrypt your data anymore. So if you get affected by this, there's probably no way to recover. So if you pay the money, you're just throwing it away.
Well, Benjamin, I know we've covered a lot today.
Yeah.
And a lot of this does have these geopolitical implications. It's no small matter what we're doing when presidents of the G20, the G5, and the United Nations are continuously talking about this and horse trading and coming back and forth in their negotiations. It's no small matter that the Communist Party of the People's Republic of China has made a decision to stockpile 0 days. That's no small matter. And so we deal with a lot of heady things here. We deal with a lot of big issues and so forth. What we try to do, like Benjamin was saying, is make it approachable, make it much simpler to understand what it is in the tradecraft, how to find and eliminate these concerns. But then in addition to that is, we don't imagine if you're on this call that you need to be told that threats are bad. You probably already get that. But instead, what we want to do is make the work of being a threat analyst, the work of being in a threat program, and doing cybersecurity effectively a bit easier, because we started with, there's a lot of challenges out there, and some of them are just the context that we work in now. The world is continuously changing. And again, I know everybody is saying that all the time, so it can seem trite, but genuinely, like moment by moment, the internet changes. Every single time it's touched and interacts with itself, there's a slight perturbation in the system that makes things continuously change. And a lot of this is just the circumstances we find ourselves in. Security is hard. Digital security is even harder. But one of the things that we wanted to close with, if you want to go to the Learn More page there,
Yes.
Benjamin, is that you can keep this thing going. You have the opportunity to, we're going to close down the lab here in about 12 minutes. When the lab closes down, the access to these things won't apply any longer. But just like Benjamin was operating in our interface, coming from that angle, so you can too. So if you go to community.riskiq.com/learn-more/illuminate, you'll see a little orange oval over that says activate trial. Everyone here can go to that web address, which we're going to link in the chat. Just thank you, Benjamin, took the words out on that. Dropped it into the chat. You can go there and say activate trial, and you can keep this thing going. And what you'll find there is, again, the same sort of interface, the same information, the same data sets that we covered today. And again, in that more approachable way.
And your attack surface and your own attack surface.
Beginning again with your own attack surface and seeing the threats that are relevant to you and actionable indicators that you can use for that scaled defense. And so we are grateful that everybody's been here today. We would encourage you to utilize the trial. these things do happen moment by moment. And today was Kaseya. And a few months ago, it was Microsoft Exchange servers. And a couple of months before that, it was Sunburst with SolarWinds Orion. And tomorrow it'll be something else.
And there was just there was just another SolarWinds announcement.
Yeah,
That there was a new vulnerability.
got announced today.
That was today. But the big thing to think about is that the amount of information that's being published is overwhelming for all of us. So if you have a way to look at the world and filter it to your perspective, what's meaningful to you, to others, your peers, your supply chain, and the adversaries and allies, it's a game changer. So if you can look at all that threat intel, all that open source intelligence, and say, out of all these thousands of articles that have been published over this last week, which are the ones I need to read and understand? Because if I miss the critical one, we have a problem. So you can filter those down to see what's important to you. And then you can broaden your horizon to say, okay, now that I have myself under control, now how does that apply to the people that I need to do business with or I rely upon to do my business? And you can make sure that they're fine, because everybody's interconnected now and we don't do everything ourselves. We might be using, Office 365 for your mail. You might be doing payment processing for somebody else. You might be doing things through a bank. All those pieces need to be understood and understand their risk, because that will ultimately could potentially impact your organization and your business and your customers.
And folks, it does appear that that there was, we have a link issue here.
Benjamin was trying to fish us, I think.
Oh, did I type the wrong thing? Hold on.
Okay.
I tried to type it.
Admit what you were doing. You were trying to fish us.
I was trying to fish you.
We should run a search. We should run a search for that just to see if it's what information's there and if it actually is registered.
Okay. I copied and pasted. Let's go there directly. I'll bring it up and we'll see what it looks like. Okay. So I just typed it in and I pasted it again. And there it is.
There you go. Okay.
Okay.
Oh yeah, and the swirlies. Yeah,
swirlies, yes. But the good, the evil, the scaling. So this is exciting times because never before were you able to take the information, consolidate it to what's important to you, but also marry it with the information that you have internally. Whether taking our data and putting it into your systems, or taking the systems you have internally and viewing it within RiskIQ, merging that together to quickly answer those things. So investigations take time. And if you can make them more efficient and effective and reliable and repeatable, your life is easier. And that's what we're trying to do.
So again, thanks for everybody being here today. I don't think there are any outstanding questions, Ryan, from the chat or from the Q&A. If there is, we can address those. And again, you spent 2 hours with us. We hope that it's been instructive. We're going to send out some material here in the post-event. Please share it with others. Come to a future workshop. It's always revolving in terms of whatever the most pertinent situation is and what is the latest thing happening in the world. And today was Kaseya. Today was about ransomware tracking, cryptocurrency payments, and ultimately identifying adversary threat infrastructure so you can safeguard your digital footprint against theirs, and prevent yourself getting entangled with threat infrastructure as your continued digital infrastructure and digital footprint changes and evolves. I think, Ryan, unless there are any outstanding questions.
No, not that I see.
All right. And again, I want to thank Brandon Dixon, our Vice President of Strategy, for being here today, especially providing some of the script logic and taking us through the Microsoft integration as well. And we'll see you again on a future workshop.
Thanks, everybody,
Thank you,
for
everyone.
attending.
Bye, everyone.